What happens when television's most respected, composed interviewer sits across from one of the most polarizing figures of modern royalty? The air in the meticulously lit television studio was thick with anticipation. At first, the conversation looked exactly as planned, a calm, dignified exchange between two powerful women. But as the minutes passed, the atmosphere began to shift, slowly but surely. What began as polite, almost deferential questions from the journalists soon spiraled into sharp, defensive exchanges, eye-rolling replies, and a mounting, undeniable tension that no one in the studio, from the crew to the silent audience, could ignore. By the end, it would no longer feel like a standard interview. It would feel like a full-blown verbal battle. Diana Sawyer, known globally for her composed professionalism and unwavering grace, sat perfectly poised in her tailored chair. She offered a warm, steady smile, the kind of genuine charm that had successfully disarmed and encouraged confessions from world leaders and hesitant celebrities alike over her long career. Across from her sat Meghan Markle, dressed immaculately in a cream silk blouse and a tailored navy blazer, her dark hair styled in voluminous, cascading waves. She carried herself with an almost regal stiffness, like someone completely prepared to control the narrative from the very first breath. "Meghan, thank you so much for carving out the time to be here with us today," Diane began warmly, her voice carrying that perfect balance of kindness and authority that had cemented her reputation as one of the most trusted figures in American journalism. Meghan returned the smile, but there was a subtle, calculated edge to it, a hint of something held back. "Thank you for having me, Diane. It's always enlightening to be invited onto platforms where I can finally clarify the truth myself, rather than relying on the twisted, often malicious narratives people seem so eager to spin." The audience chuckled politely, a nervous sound that acknowledged the deliberate undertone in Meghan's voice. Diane's eyes flickered with the faintest sign of surprise at the preemptive strike, but she pressed forward with her legendary grace. "Well, that's exactly the reason I wanted to talk with you. People have seen endless headlines and speculation, but they haven't always heard your voice directly. Let's start simply. How are you doing? How is life, truly, these days?" Meghan crossed one leg elegantly over the other, straightened her back almost aggressively, and gave a deliberate, audible sigh. "Life is busy, incredibly demanding, and often complicated," she stated firmly. "When you've lived under this constant, intense public scrutiny for years, you learn to not just survive, but to thrive in spite of it. But it's important to remember that people like me, people in my position, are often the ones carrying the crushing weight of everyone else's expectations and judgments." Her tone was firm, almost lecturing rather than just conversing. Diane nodded carefully, allowing the moment of silence to pass before continuing. "And how is Harry?" Diane asked gently, a soft, encouraging smile softening her words. "Many people admire the strength you've both shown and the way you've stood by each other through significant challenges." For a brief moment, Meghan's face hardened, her expression sharpening noticeably. She tilted her chin upward in a subtle act of defiance. "Harry is fine, Diane, thank you. But let's be absolutely clear. Harry isn't my shield, and he certainly isn't my story. People always want to reduce me to a side note to him, or to define my struggles through his royal lens." She paused for impact. "But the truth is, I'm the one who has had to navigate relentless, often racially motivated hostility far more than he ever did." The answer was pointed and almost dismissive of the well-intended question. A visible murmur spread through the audience, just audible enough for Meghan to notice. She leaned back slightly, clearly unfazed by the reaction. Diane, unfaltering, tried to ease the weight of the reply with another steady smile. "I understand. The question comes from a genuine place, though, because so many see your marriage as a powerful partnership." Meghan laughed softly, a sound notably devoid of warmth. "A partnership, sure, a very real one, but let's not pretend that people don't constantly and annoyingly try to define me through him. I find that deeply insulting." Diane inhaled slowly, her smile steady, but noticeably thinner now. She subtly shifted gears. "Let me ask about your children. Many viewers at home admire the sincere way you speak about motherhood. How has that experience changed you?" This was where the tension became truly palpable, tightening like a knot. Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly, Changed me. Again, that's the assumption that I needed changing. I've always been strong, independent, and acutely aware of who I am. Having children doesn't define me, Diane. I define myself. Her tone was clipped. But, of course, the press and the public love to paint me as if motherhood somehow redeemed me, as if I needed redeeming in the first place. The studio grew noticeably quieter. Even Diane's co-producers, watching from behind the cameras, exchanged nervous, confirming glances. Meghan's words weren't just sharp. They carried an air of blatant defiance that turned even the gentlest of questions into triggers. Diane remained collected, though her posture shifted subtly forward, indicating focus. I hear what you're saying. Still, many mothers feel a profound, soul-deep transformation. It's often a universally shared experience. Meghan cut in quickly, a flash of irritation in her eyes. Yes, but my experience is different, Diane. And I think we should finally stop trying to make me relatable to everyone else. I'm simply not everyone else. Her words landed heavily, echoing in the silence that followed. Diane took a slow, measured breath, keeping her calm perfectly intact. She transitioned, hoping to soften the atmosphere by moving to the central topic. Let's talk about your journey with the royal family. You've spoken openly before, but how do you feel now, looking back on your experience? And that's when Meghan's expression shifted once more. Her jaw tightened, her eyes gleamed with undisguised irritation, and her voice grew noticeably sharper. Honestly, I feel like any mention of the royal family is a carefully laid trap. Every time I'm asked about them, it's not genuine curiosity, it's judgment packaged as interest. I don't owe anyone, especially not an institution that thrived on tradition at the expense of individuality, any answers. The harsh words hung in the air like a blade. Diane's smile faltered for the first time, just slightly, though she quickly recovered and offered a slow nod, acknowledging the response without agreeing or challenging. Yet, the tension had officially arrived. The boiling point. Viewers at home could feel the shift. What started as a polished, professional interview was visibly transforming into a contentious verbal tug-of-war. Meghan's tone now carried an unmistakable arrogance, and Diane's legendary composure was being rigorously tested in real time. The camera zoomed in tighter, capturing every flicker of expression. What had started as polished elegance was hardening into something sharper, colder. Meghan leaned back, crossing her arms loosely, a defiant signal that she wasn't here to be handled. She was here to dominate. Diane, steady as ever, adjusted her notes slightly. You've spoken about the immense challenges of entering the royal family. But at the same time, many have pointed out that the titles, the global recognition, and the unprecedented visibility also brought significant opportunities. Do you see that vital balance? Meghan's laugh was abrupt, a little too sharp. Opportunities? Let's call them what they were, Diane. Chains. The so-called opportunities were just expectations to perform, to smile, to play a part in their antiquated play. You might see it as a gift. I see it, frankly, as exploitation. Diane nodded thoughtfully, refusing to flinch. I hear you. But others might argue that the instant, global visibility gave you the chance to significantly amplify your vital causes. Women's rights, mental health advocacy, racial equality. Don't you feel the position also allowed you to make a tangible difference? Meghan tilted her head, a smirk tugging at her lips. Difference at what cost? I didn't need a tiara on my head to care about women's rights. I didn't need a palace to speak about mental health. The irony, Diane, is that people seem to genuinely think that without the royal family, I wouldn't have had a platform. That's an insult, frankly. Her words landed heavy. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Diane leaned forward slightly, her voice still soft, but firmer now. I don't think anyone would deny your talents or your passion, Meghan, but visibility is powerful. And whether you intended it or not, being part of the monarchy elevated your voice to a truly global stage. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Elevated by whose standards? I was already making a difference before any of them knew my name. It's time people stopped acting like I should be grateful for being tolerated by an institution that didn't even want me there. There it was, the undeniable sting. Diane's professional calm wavered, only for a second. She straightened her papers slowly, buying herself a fraction of time. She had interviewed presidents, dictators, and movie stars in full scandal, but Meghan's defensive carried a unique venom. Switching gears, Diane tried a lighter, more commercial angle. Let's talk about your Netflix series. The first season had tremendous success. There have been reports, rumors really, that you requested a much larger budget and more creative control for the next season. Can you comment on that? Meghan's eyebrows shot up, her lips curling into a cool, dismissive smile. Rumors. That's your word, not mine. Let me be clear. When you're creating content that reshapes cultural narratives, you don't ask for permission. You set the terms. If people want my voice, they'll have to understand it comes at a premium. Quality isn't free, Diane. The remark landed with a jolt. A few people in the audience audibly gasped at the frankness. Diane, ever composed, kept her tone light. I understand that business perspective, but some critics have framed it as being demanding. Meghan didn't miss a beat. Demanding, or refusing to settle for less than what I deserve. Funny how women with standards are called difficult, while men with the same standards are universally called leaders. Don't you find that interesting, Diane? Her voice had taken on a lecture-like cadence, as though she weren't answering questions, but issuing declarations. Diane folded her hands carefully. That's a fair point about double standards, but let me press a little. Do you think some of the backlash could be less about gender and more about perception? That perhaps the public feels a bit disconnected when strong statements about privacy and a need for peace are paired with very public, highly lucrative contracts and productions. The temperature in the room dropped significantly. Meghan's smile completely vanished, replaced by an icy glare. Perception is a lazy word. People believe what they're told by tabloids and journalists. She let the word linger, who thrive on poking at contradictions. Privacy doesn't mean silence, Diane. Privacy means I decide what to share, when, and how. That's power. And yes, I've earned it. Her tone was condescending, daring Diane to challenge her. The silence stretched, taut as a rope pulled too tight. Diane raised a hand subtly to the floor manager, signaling, not yet. She wanted this to play out. The veteran journalist smiled again, but there was steel underneath the warmth. Now let's pivot slightly. When you think back on your time in the royal family, what do you feel? Anger? Sadness? Or perhaps relief? Meghan adjusted her posture, leaning forward this time, her voice dripping with disdain. I feel nothing. Honestly, they're irrelevant to me now. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about a crumbling institution. I've moved on. It's the media that can't let go. That landed like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the room. Diane blinked slowly, choosing her words with surgical precision. You don't think the royal family remains relevant in any way? Meghan's laugh was sharp, dismissive. Relevant to who? To people clinging to fairy tales and outdated traditions? Maybe, but not to me. They're a relic, Diane. A museum piece, and I refuse to live my life as someone else's exhibit. The arrogance in her tone filled the studio like thick, suffocating smoke. Even Diane's unshakable calm was beginning to crack. Her lips tightened, and her pen tapped once against her notepad, a subtle tell that signaled the shift. Meghan, she said carefully, her voice now carrying a low, serious weight. You've built a career on speaking truth, as you call it, but don't you think truth also requires humility? The question was soft, almost gentle, but its edge was razor-sharp, cutting through the bravado. Meghan froze, her jaw tightening. Humility? She repeated with a scoff. It's interesting how people demand humility only from those who dare to stand tall. I've bowed enough in my life. I won't do it here. The words landed like thunder. The audience, caught between awe and profound discomfort, leaned forward in silence. Diane, with decades of patience and experience under her belt, inhaled slowly. She gave the smallest of nods to herself, as though acknowledging privately, the storm was here. The polite opening of the interview was long gone. The battle lines had been drawn. Meghan's arrogance was no longer subtle. It was blatant, unrestrained, and the patience of one of television's most respected journalists was wearing dangerously thin. As the cameras kept rolling, everyone in the studio knew something explosive was about to happen. The final unraveling. The studio was silent except for the soft hum of the cameras. Meghan leaned back, arms folded, her expression set in that familiar mixture of defiance and superiority. Diane sat opposite, her legendary composure beginning to thin like glass under extreme pressure. Let's move into something personal again, Diane said, her tone still professional, but noticeably tighter. Your husband, Prince Harry. Many people see him as central to your story. How would you describe your relationship today, given all the pressures, the attention, and the seismic choices you've made together? Meghan smirked, tilting her head with a dismissive chuckle. Harry and I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Our marriage isn't some public soap opera to be dissected by the media or reduced to sound bites. Frankly, it's insulting that you even frame it like that, Diane. We're stronger than ever, and unlike some people, we don't need validation from strangers. The audience reacted audibly, some gasped, others shifted uncomfortably. Diane didn't blink, but her jaw tightened. She tried again, softening her voice. I meant no disrespect. I was asking because many admire the way you two present a united front, and they're curious how you maintain that strength. Meghan's reply came like a dagger wrapped in silk. Curiosity is an entitlement. People confuse the two. Our private lives are not here for public entertainment, no matter how desperately interviewers want to squeeze a headline out of them. The sting was unmistakable. Diane's hand twitched slightly as she adjusted her notes, her patience being tested inch by inch. She chose a new angle. Let me ask about your children. You've often spoken about wanting to protect them from the same scrutiny you faced. How do you manage that balance, given how public your work and appearances remain? Meghan's lips curved into a humorless smile. Balance is a word people like to throw around when they don't understand what it's like to be me. My children are protected because I say so, because I refuse to let vultures circle them. And before you ask the obvious follow-up, no, Diane, I don't know the public pictures, details, or anecdotes. They're mine, not anyone else's storyline. The sharpness in her tone rippled through the studio like static. Diane inhaled slowly, visibly forcing her calm. I only asked because you've spoken about motherhood before in very personal terms, and I thought our viewers might appreciate hearing more about how you navigate that. Meghan's laugh was clipped, cold. Viewers don't deserve every piece of me, Diane. That's where people get confused. I share what I want, when I want. And if that's not enough for them, or for you, that's not my problem. The studio audience sat frozen. Diane pressed her lips together for a moment, and then tried one more pivot to the monarchy. Looking back, do you feel there's any room for reconciliation, or do you consider that chapter fully closed? Meghan's eyes flashed with pure irritation. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with disdain. Reconciliation with an institution built on hypocrisy, on outdated rituals, on people who never wanted me there in the first place. Why on earth would I reconcile with a system that thrives on exclusion? No, Diane. That chapter isn't closed. It's burned. The words landed like dynamite. Diane blinked slowly, a flicker of genuine shock crossing her face. You see, Meghan continued, her voice gaining volume. People like you love to romanticize the monarchy, fairy tales, castles, crowns. But for me, it was a gilded cage. And the sooner people stop expecting me to bow down in gratitude for being trapped, the better. That was the moment Diane's patience visibly wavered. Her pen tapped once, sharp against her notepad. Her calm smile faltered just enough to reveal a sliver of steel beneath. Meghan, she said evenly, her voice low and tight. I think it's important to remember that while the monarchy has its flaws, it also gave you a platform that amplified your voice globally. Don't you think there's at least a humble acknowledgement owed for that? Meghan scoffed, her voice rising with combative irritation. An acknowledgement? I owe them nothing. If anything, they owe me for putting up with their nonsense as long as I did. I built myself long before I ever walked into that palace. Harry may have been born into it, but I brought the authenticity. Without me, they'd still be just another tired royal family trying to stay relevant. The audience audibly gasped, louder this time. Diane's face hardened, though she kept her voice level. That's a bold statement. It's the truth, Meghan shot back, her tone now openly combative. And people can't stand it when a woman, especially a woman like me, dares to say it. The air in the studio was electric. Diane, her legendary composure fraying, leaned forward slightly. Her voice, still measured, carried a sharper edge. Meghan, I've interviewed presidents, activists, even war survivors. I've seen strength expressed in humility, in grace, in perseverance. What I'm seeing now feels less like strength and more like arrogance. Do you see how that might come across? Meghan's jaw tightened, her smirk returning with venom. Arrogance is just a word people use when they can't handle confidence. I refuse to apologize for knowing my worth, Diane. Maybe that's uncomfortable for some, but that's their problem, not mine. The silence after her words was deafening. Diane's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. The final word. The veteran journalist adjusted her notes one final time, her composure hanging by a thread. The audience could feel it. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. The cameras rolled on, the studio lights burning hot. Meghan shifted in her seat, her chin raised high, completely exuding defiance. Then Diane leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate, and sharper than ever before. Meghan, I've given you the space to tell your story. I've listened as you dismissed, deflected, and talked down to me and to this audience. Her eyes locked onto Meghan's. But let me be perfectly clear. This isn't strength. This isn't authenticity. This is arrogance. And frankly, it's unbecoming. The audience froze. Meghan blinked, her composure wobbling for the first time all morning. Excuse me, she said, her voice colder now. Diane didn't hesitate. You've spoken of privacy while actively seeking the spotlight. You've rejected the monarchy while benefiting from every ounce of its visibility. You've demanded total control while mocking anyone who dares to question you. And through it all, you've treated this conversation, me, and the people watching at home with contempt. Enough is enough. The studio erupted in whispers. Meghan's mouth fell open, then snapped shut, her eyes flashing with indignation. You have no right. I have every right. Diane cut in, her tone sharp as glass. I've sat across from leaders and survivors who've shown more humility in 5 minutes than you've displayed in an hour. You talk about power, Meghan, but power without grace is just ego. And that's all you've shown us today. Meghan's breath came faster. You don't know me. You don't know what I've endured. And yet here you are, Diane interrupted, her voice unwavering, painting yourself as the sole victim, dismissing everyone else's truth but your own. Let me remind you, without Harry, without the royal family, without the very platform you claim to despise, you wouldn't be sitting in this chair. You wouldn't be here at all. The words landed like a thunderclap. The audience audibly gasped. Meghan's face flushed crimson, her lips trembling as if searching for the right comeback. But for the first time, there was nothing. Diane pressed on, her tone final, unshakable. You came here today, and instead of showing grace, you showed condescension. Instead of engaging, you lectured, and instead of conversation, you gave us contempt. This program cannot and will not continue in this way. Not with you treating it as your personal stage. Meghan had shot to her feet, her blazer snapping sharply as she pulled it closed. This is outrageous. I won't be spoken to like this. Diane's voice cut through the chaos. Then perhaps you shouldn't come on shows where you expect to be worshipped instead of questioned. That's not journalism. That's theater. And we don't do theater here. The studio went dead silent. Meghan, her face a mask of pure fury, yanked off her microphone and tossed it onto the chair. The sound echoed like a gunshot. This interview is over, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. And you'll regret the way you've treated me. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed off stage, her heels clicking like hammers against the studio floor. The cameras caught every second right up until she disappeared behind the curtain. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Diane turned back to the camera, her expression calm once more, though her eyes still burned with a profound fire. To our viewers at home, she said softly, I want to apologize. This is not how interviews are meant to go. We strive for honesty, fairness, and respect. What you just witnessed was none of those things. And for that, I am truly sorry. The audience, stunned but grateful, broke into hesitant, then strong applause. Diane closed her notebook, set down her pen, and leaned back. The storm had passed, but its echoes would ripple far beyond that studio. By evening, clips of Meghan's walkout and Diane's unflinching final words would dominate headlines around the world, and in living rooms everywhere, the question would linger. Was this the day Meghan Markle finally lost control of her own narrative? If you enjoyed this dramatic showdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the never miss the next explosive story. Your support helps us bring you more unforgettable moments.